Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Wednesday, September 29th. That means we are, 3 days away from Notre Dame in Cincinnati. I am joined today by my guy, Sean Davis from ESPN Chicago, also part of the Lucky Lefty podcast with Malik Zaire. So, Sean, thank you, first of all, so much for being with us today to talk Notre Dame football.
It's always a pleasure to join you, my friend.
And you're answering one of my mom's wishes, buddy. So you said before the show,
we're dedicating this show to your mom.
So the story behind that's why I was laughing. The show started. So Sean, the last few times Sean's been on, he's been on events. So he's been kind enough to kind of fill in for me when I was either sick or super busy and all that. And I think him and Vince do a great job. So I was like, hey, they do a great job. Let's get them on there together more. So after the last one with him and Vince, my mom says, hey, when are you going to do a show with Sean? I want to see you do a show with Sean. So here we go, Ma.
Here we go.
Doing a show with Sean.
This is for you.
Sean, this is the matchup that I think is that most people are entertained by. It's the Notre Dame defense against the Cincinnati offense. I think this is the unit that gets – these are the units for both teams that get the most publicity. These are the units that I think have the most storyline intrigue. You've got Mike Denbrock, former Notre Dame OC, did a great job at Notre Dame, in my opinion, as a coach here, against Marcus Freeman, and obviously the former Cincinnati defensive coordinator, recruited all the guys that are currently playing for them. Yeah. Mike Mickens. 3 of Notre Dame's 4 defensive coaches came to Notre Dame from Cincinnati, when you include Mike Elson, who came here from Cincinnati. So Michael Young, one of their top receivers, is a Notre Dame transfer, and all those things are great storylines. At the end of the day, none of that matters. This is about talent versus talent. This is going to be a very interesting matchup, and this is going to be the matchup, in my opinion, that's going to be the most exciting and entertaining to watch, and is going to tell us the most about this Notre Dame defense and whether or not it truly has come the lengths that we think it has since the season opener.
I totally agree with you. Going back, doing my homework for this game, watched the Miami, Ohio game, watched the Indiana game. It's one thing that stood out to me. I really feel like we can get after the offensive line of Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. If you go back, Brian, and you look at the beginning of the Indiana game, it's safe to say Indiana could have been up 21-0.
At least.
In that game.
Yes.
They threw the interception in the end zone. They totally dominated.
Turnover on downs. I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, really, it could have been 28-0. I mean,
you're right.
We're being kind saying 21.
You're right. And their defensive line, which I don't think they have better players along the front than Notre Dame has, totally dominated Cincinnati's offensive line.
Until McFadden got kicked out of the game. The linebacker got kicked out of the game. That's when things started to turn.
That's when things start to turn. But the other thing, and I'll explain it like this, and hopefully fans can understand. I'm a huge Avengers fan. Love the Avengers. So
another reason that we're friends.
Yeah.
One of the many.
So, you remember in the end game, they go back to try and get one of the time stone, and they go to the temple in New York, and Dr. Strange had not yet been the overseer of the temple. It was his master at the time, and she's explaining to Hope, you can't do this and you can't mess with time because time has a flow. And if you put a pebble in the middle of that, you create an alternative route. In games like this, it's always something that calls the natural flow of this game in my opinion, has Notre Dame taking over late in the game. Because talent should win out eventually. Cincinnati should come in fired up. It's a program-defining game. It's a career-defining game for Luke Fickell. All of that, they have great motivation. Something happens in special teams, something strange happened that changes the flow. Brian, at the beginning of the fourth quarter last week, no one thought that game would be a blowout.
No.
The actual flow of that game was whoever has the ball last will have a chance to win this game.
It was the Cam Hart interception that opened the floodgates to me, because that was the one that put them up 27-13, and then now all of a sudden Wisconsin's out of their offense, and that is when Notre Dame took over, because they do not play from behind.
And even before that, I think the shock was the Chris Tyree special teams.
Yeah.
Chris Tyree.
All the energy got sucked out of that.
All the energy. Yeah. And once again now, the game is back in the hands of Graham Mertz. And that's something that Wisconsin didn't want.
No.
And what happens next? The Cam Hart interception. So look for, I think Notre Dame is +6 giveaway. They've taken the ball away 11 times, given it away 5 times. Cincinnati is like +3, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm looking that up now.
I think we're +2 against Cincinnati takeaway giveaway. So
yeah, Notre Dame is +6.
+6.
So 11-5, and then Cincinnati is let's see here. Cincinnati is +6 as well.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. They're +3.
Okay.
So they've taken away 9 in 3 games and given away 6.
That's what I wanted to point to. 6 giveaways. I can count at least 5 passes that Ritter just floated in the air.
Miami of Ohio,
yes.
Murray State, Indiana.
Yes.
That's the opponents.
Sean,
and we'll get into a lot of that here as we move forward. I wanted to bring something up with you that's kind of more bigger picture before we dive into the specific matchup.
Yeah.
Cincinnati's players are talking a lot about in advance of this game. There's the quote from the quarterback, but he's not alone. The quote being basically Mike Denbrock warning Desmond Ritter, the quarterback, and Mike Denbrock being the OC at Cincinnati, about how it's going to be a loud environment, and it will be. And his comment was basically not for long. It won't be loud for long. I got to ask you, in your opinion, is this Cincinnati convincing themselves that they are on Notre Dame's level, or is this Cincinnati, because I have an opinion on this, or is this Cincinnati buying into the disrespect about Notre Dame nationally? And then the mantras that they hear as players about lack of speed, Notre Dame's not that good, winning ugly. I read an article at SI and another one in ESPN this week that said basically this is definitely not one of Brian Kelly's more talented teams, which I know you and I both disagree with strongly.
Yeah.
What of those two do you think is behind the Cincinnati players doing a lot? I mean, it's Wednesday and they're still just, I mean, we're not even halfway through practice week yet, and they're just a lot of this.
Yeah, that's a lot in this mixing bowl. It's a lot in this mixing bowl. I don't know what you would call this cake. If you put it in the oven, it came out. I think the Marcus Freeman bolting is for the defensive players, the guy that really developed them, coached them. It's a chip on their shoulder. Mike Denbrock, the one to win for him. And I think they feel this. This is what I honestly feel. Notre Dame does this every week, Brian. Like, everybody gets up for Notre Dame. Notre Dame plays these type of games all the time. Cincinnati hasn't been in this type of game. And I know they went to the Peach Bowl and played against Georgia. But this is a program-defining game. You know how much pressure that is? And it goes to your point. Like, when you know that type of pressure is on you, you're trying to talk yourself out of it to kind of take the pressure off of you. And it's like, no, you still have to play the game.
Yeah, they're not that good. They're this, and you
still have to play the game. And I told Malik, we briefly talked about it on our podcast. This is the game where I would go to the administrators and say, look, I need you, the little visitors entrance, shut that gate. I need both teams in the tunnel this game. Like, if they want to talk trash, let's get both teams in the tunnel. And let's really ramp it up for this game.
It's going to be intense, and I don't, part of me says, hey, look, I like that Cincinnati's coming in with that fire because I think it adds some intrigue, and I don't necessarily have a problem with players running their mouths, and I don't have an issue with kids convincing themselves that they're good. I just kind of feel like, we've talked about history on this show, Sean, and I'm a big history guy, history major and all that. And it's the quote that's attributed to Yamamoto after Pearl Harbor, and now whether or not he said it or not, there's some debate, but the quote that's attributed him is, I fear all we've done is wake up a sleeping giant. And that's kind of how I feel about teams that kind of come to these games running their mouths about Notre Dame. It's like one of my knocks on Brian Kelly has always been, he looks at these games as just another game when they're not. It's not just another game. You want to get the Notre Dame players realizing it's not just another game, run your mouth throughout the week of practice. And people say, oh, it's bulletin board material. Trust me, I've talked to enough people. The Notre Dame players know absolutely what the Cincinnati players are saying about them.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a smart strategy. Whether you believe it or not, I don't think that's the smartest strategy, because I don't think you want to poke the bear. I don't think you want Notre Dame looking at this the same way they'd look at playing Clemson or another program like that. I don't know if you want Notre Dame coming out with the energy level, oh, you know what? They really are the 7th best team in the country. Because if you're Cincinnati, you want Notre Dame looking at you like, oh, it's a group of 5 team. They're really not that good. They haven't beaten anybody. You want them overlooking you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if running your mouth about Notre Dame is really the smartest idea this week. So, but we'll find out if I'm correct or not when we get to Saturday. But let's get into this matchup, Sean.
Okay.
This is the to me the intriguing aspect of this. By the way, before we begin with that, we got up here Matt Sokolowski. Happy Wednesday, IB Nation. I just turned 20 today. Happy birthday, Matt. Appreciate you. You're spending some of your time today with us. We appreciate that very, very much. So, Sean, let's get into this matchup. First, before we begin, I want to take a look at the recruiting comparisons between the two, because this is the interesting thing for me. You know, people say, well, Notre Dame doesn't recruit well enough to compete with the Bamas. And, well, if you're going to base it off of recruiting, number one, Notre Dame certainly has recruited better than Cincinnati. But what I think this matchup also shows is just how, to me, unimportant focusing on recruiting rankings can be.
Yeah.
Because you look at it, look at some of the guys on that list that aren't ranked real high that have been pretty darn good football players for Notre Dame, and then you look at the guys for Cincinnati that have been pretty darn good football players. A lot of 3 stars and not top 200 players on that list. And you look at the Notre Dame offense, they have 9 4- and 5-star players in their lineup, and they're struggling to do anything right now. And then this defense has almost as many 3 stars in it as it has 4 stars in it. And this is the unit that's playing dominant football. So talent development beats star rankings, right? And now, doesn't mean that star rankings don't sometimes get it right, but talent and development matters more than whatever star ranking some place like Rivals or 247 is going to throw at you.
Yeah, we can just go to Kyle Hamilton, right? Even though he was ranked at the time, I think when you started breaking down his film, some people had him a 4-star, some people had him a high 3-star, and you were like, no, this kid is a difference maker. He's a 5-star.
Mm-hmm.
He should be a 5-star. And it doesn't matter what people say about you. When you see people that are difference makers at any position, that's what you want in your program. And as we look at these stars, you're right. Some of these stars don't line up with players that have become difference makers for both teams. And that's what matters the most. And that goes to the development and the level of development for both programs. You have to tip your cap to both coaching staffs.
Yeah, and again, it's so much of this is about development.
Mm-hmm.
I still can't believe everyone didn't have Kyle Hamilton as a 5-star player by the time his season. I mean, it still just blows my mind that was the case. But Isaiah Foskey's another one. He's a guy that to me that people didn't see him for what he actually was. He was an outstanding player. Drew White was criminally underrated. You don't produce at Fort St. Thomas Aquinas like he produced and have the offer list he had. If you're the 977th best player in the country, he's going to end up being a 3-year starter at Notre Dame at middle linebacker for a team that's going to have a phenomenal win-loss record and has been fueled by its defense. So, Georgia decided J.D. Bertrand wasn't good enough for them. So thank you for that. Appreciate you. So Matt, recruiting wise, this is clearly an advantage Notre Dame. But I think what we also see is on the Cincinnati defense, I feel like there's some players that you look and say that guy's a first-round NFL draft pick. The one thing that I don't necessarily see as much of at Cincinnati, and I know Desmond Ritter gets a lot of hype, and he's got some talent, but I don't see a lot of first-round draft picks over here like I do on defense. There's no Ahmad Gardner on their defense, on their offense. There's no Myjai Sanders on their defense, and on their offense. The only guy that was really ranked high was in the starting lineups, Jerome Ford, who transferred from Alabama.
Right.
So that is, I think this group maybe has a little bit more depth of talent than the defense, but I still feel like the high-end talent that Cincinnati has is actually on the other side of the ball.
I totally agree with that. And their defensive unit is the unit that I'm more worried about going into this game. And a lot of people might say, really? And once again, I watched the Indiana tape, And I saw their offensive line get manhandled pretty easily. And I saw that Indiana defense have a great game plan and execute. And what I've seen, the progression I've seen with Marcus Freeman and this defense, if we think what they did against Wisconsin was good, what they can do against Cincinnati, in my opinion, based upon what I saw from their offensive line, because I think that offensive line from Wisconsin did a pretty good job of protecting the flaws of Graham Mertz. Mm-hmm. Eventually, once the game swung and it was put in his hands, he was exposed. I think Marcus Freeman is going to make Desmond Ritter play with his opposite hand. And what I mean by that, can you execute with your offhand? Like the things that you love to do, we're not going to let you do that. So can you go to option 3 and 4 and beat us? And I don't think he can do that. And can I say something else right quick?
Sure.
Brian Kelly is quite petty. Did you know this, Brian?
I've known that for a while, but why in this instance?
Quite petty, because I've never heard a quarterback referred to as sneaky accurate. He referred to Desmond Ritter in his press conference Monday as sneaky accurate. And I was like, wow. What are you really trying to say?
I don't even know what that means, because I don't think he is I don't even think he is accurate. Accurate.
Are you trying to give him a compliment, but in the back of your mind, you really know he's not accurate?
Yeah.
I was like, that's really petty.
Yeah, that's it. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like that one. But so you talked about the line, Sean. Let's transition into the Notre Dame run defense against the Cincinnati rush defense. And this matchup is very interesting to me because I think we're still at that time of the season when numbers can still be a little bit inflated by one good performance or one bad performance.
Yeah.
And I think for Notre Dame, it's the bad performance. It's the opener against Florida State where they gave up 264 yards.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do some math in my head here. I don't think they've given that up in the last 3 games combined. I'm trying to do some math here. That's why I love this computer. I got my little calculator here because I don't want to do, 259. They gave up 264 yards in the opener. They've given up 259 in the 3 cents. Which, by the way, is less than what Wisconsin averaged coming into that matchup, by the way.
Yeah.
They've given up 86.3 yards per play in the last 3 games, of course, playing Wisconsin and Purdue. You could kind of look at the Purdue game and say, well, they didn't have Xander Horvath, and they don't really run the ball anyway. Okay, fair enough. That's fair. You look at the Toledo game, I think that they gave up 124 yards. It's a little inflated by the fact that they had that 167-yard run in the fourth quarter. But then you say, okay, well, there is no such excuse for the Wisconsin game. That was flat out dominance. And so you're seeing a trend for Notre Dame, which is in the right direction of being a really dominant defense. And the numbers, when you consider you gave up 264 yards in the opener, those numbers are actually pretty impressive. Now the flip side of that is, Sean, or not the flip side, but the reason that's important to me is you talk about making them play left-handed. The phrase I like to use is one-dimensional. And to me, when Cincinnati is good on offense, even though I would argue they've got better pass game weapons, and we'll get into Alec Price, Michael Young, Desmond Ritter, Josh Wiley, got 2 really good tight ends.
Yeah.
We'll get into all those in a second. But when they're really at their best is when they can be balanced, which protects the line, protects the quarterback, and takes some of that pressure off Desmond Ritter. To me, this is the matchup that matters most, because if Notre Dame can force Cincinnati to be one-dimensional, which is exactly what Indiana did, then that's where you're going to have success. Because I don't think Desmond Ritter is the kind of quarterback that if he has to put it all on his shoulders, is going to go on the road and beat a team like Notre Dame. So this is the matchup to me that is the most intriguing. And on the flip side, you look at a Cincinnati offense whose numbers at 165 a game and 5.0 yards per attempt looks good, right? But it's inflated by the opener against Miami of Ohio. They rushed for 247 yards, 8 yards a carry. In their next 2 games, they only went for 130 for 4.1 yards per carry against Murray State, a game that, by the way, an FCS opponent that was tied 7-7 at halftime. And then against Indiana, they went for 118 and only 3.3 yards per attempt. This is the area that Notre Dame, Sean, has to dominate in this matchup.
I totally agree. And as I said before, the trend that this defense is on with Marcus Freeman, and I'm interested in seeing what do you think, because we go back post Toledo, it was Brian Kelly that said in his press conference, we didn't know if we're going to make the change, we're going to make the change. We're not about to be going back and forth. We're going to make the change, switch to the defense that we're going to be eventually, and just live with the consequences of making that switch. And since then, in my opinion, the defense has played faster. It looks like the linebackers have played probably their best 2 games after that Toledo game, in my opinion. Just not giving up so many of the big plays, making the right fits, coming downhill, supporting the defensive front getting into the backfield, causing havoc from the first snap. And then, you live with the big plays. The big play last week was actually a great counter, in my opinion, just a great play call by Paul Chris to give you counter action and come back with the shovel pass. It was just a great call to go up against what Marcus Freeman had been doing. They got a big play, and it led to points. And that's the same thing I think Marcus Freeman is going to do. He's going to forcing Paul Chris to go so deep into his playbook just to be able to create something. And that's the challenge. That's the chess game with Denbrock and Freeman that we're going to see Saturday. How deep does Mike Denbrock how uncomfortable do you have to make him, Desmond Ritter, and the rest of that offense to be able to create opportunities for big plays? Because I don't think they're going to make it easy. The greatest advantage that Notre Dame has with all of its flaws that the national media is talking about on both sides of the ball, they have a chess piece that can dictate to you what you're going to do. And not everybody has that. They dictated last week, Kyle Hamilton is going to take your tight end away. That's it. Now find something else to do. We're going to take away your run game. Kyle Hamilton is going to take your tight end away.
Right.
Can you beat us outside? I think they're going to do the same thing with Cincinnati. I don't know how he's going. I don't know if Kyle Hamilton is going to be more at the line of scrimmage. I don't know if he's going to be more center field. Whatever Marcus Freeman decides to do, he's going to do that. And on the other side for us is Michael Mayer. Like, that's the piece.
Right.
How are we using him? Where do we want to put him to dictate coverage, how teams want to attack us? And then from there, you see Kevin Austin had the big day. And then they came back to Michael Mayer late, hit him on the big seam route. That's such an advantage to have chess pieces like that. So this defense, in my opinion, can have a better performance. I really believe this. Can have a better performance against Cincinnati than they did against Wisconsin, because I believe Wisconsin's offensive line is better than Cincinnati's offensive line. And
see, that's going to be the interesting part of this matchup, Sean, is because I agree that Wisconsin has a better offensive line than Cincinnati. However, I think that Cincinnati has the better quarterback and the better skill. How does that sort of, so like with Wisconsin, what you could do is if you beat them up front, they had no chance. Against Cincinnati, you can beat them up front, but they still have enough playmakers that they can get the ball out and hurt you. And to your point, that's where you say, okay, well, if you have to use Kyle Hamilton as a run game weapon, I think that hurts you in the pass game.
Absolutely.
This is one of those games where your front 4 and your 2 inside linebackers have to dominate this matchup. That to me is the key in this matchup for Notre Dame. Is you have to do this week what you did last week, which is control the line of scrimmage for 60 minutes, because as you mentioned, this is a Cincinnati offense that's not necessarily a potent rushing team. They never have been a potent rushing team. They weren't a potent rushing team when Brian Kelly was there. The ground game is simply a complement to their pass game.
Yeah.
But when they don't have that complement is when they, in my opinion, is when they get in trouble. And we saw this last year against Georgia. Look, the defense played well enough to beat Georgia last year. Cincinnati's defense played well enough to beat Georgia. The problem is their offense completely failed in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is they could not get the run game going. They only rushed for 99 yards in that game, despite having a long touchdown run from Jerome Ford early in that game. You look at some of the games last year where they were a little bit more competitive, a little bit tighter games against Tulsa and against UCF, games where they averaged 3.9 and 3.0 yards per attempt. You go back and look early in the year when they struggled a little bit with Army, 1.97 yards per attempt. Well, then the games where they were really impressive, they blew out SMU, blew out Memphis, blew out Houston, blew out East Carolina in consecutive games. They ran for at least 240 yards in each game and averaged at least 5.9 yards per attempt in every game. And that takes that pressure off Desmond Ritter. He gets comfortable in the pocket. He's able to get the ball out and be effective. So the blueprint is not that much different from last week in regards to the priority numero uno has to be shutting down the run game. And even though it's not their strength, it's, to your point, it's to make them play sort of, you say left-handed, I say one-dimensional. I think where I would somewhat push back is I think you need to make them, not push back, because I think you're taking it a different direction. I'm going to take it another direction. I want to see Cincinnati play right-handed, right? Which, let's assume that you say that's their strength. But it's because they have to, not because they want to. And that's the biggest difference. Cincinnati wants to be effective throwing the football. Obviously, they're not a huge pass it 50 times team, but they want to take some big shots and get the ball on the perimeter. But when you're forcing them to pass because they can't run, they're not as good. And I think that's true of a lot of teams. We've seen that from Notre Dame in the last couple of games, where Notre Dame's offense was really good throwing the ball the first two games, but now there is no run threat, basically. Teams know that they have to throw. They take away the run game with the box. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you're putting more guys in the coverage and you're making things a little bit more challenging for your offense. I think that's the blueprint for slowing down the Cincinnati team. This is a big Cincinnati line. It's a little bigger than maybe you might expect from a non-Power 5 team. They're 305, 300 to 310, 15 across the board. They got some size. But the big thing is, Sean, is they have the same weakness that Wisconsin's line had last week. They're not athletic.
Not athletic.
And that's where Notre Dame's this is the thing we talked about last week. Everybody, Wisconsin's line's so big, you're not going to have Kurt Hinish. Okay, that's fine. But speed and leverage beat size almost every time in football. Almost every time. If you can win the leverage battle and play with speed, those big guys are going to struggle. And that's what happened last week, and that's going to be the same thing. And you'd said something earlier about run fits. They have to be disciplined in the run game, because here's my big fear. Yeah. My biggest fear is they dominate. One miss and Jerome Ford goes for 70.
Right.
That's the difference between Cincinnati and Wisconsin. Because Ches Malusi may go for 30 if you make a mistake, but he's going to get caught by Kyle Hamilton.
Right.
Jerome Ford's not getting caught by anybody if he gets in space.
Yeah.
That, to me, it's like the Florida State game. I mean, there was a lot of times where, from a run game standpoint, Florida State didn't really run the ball effectively on Notre Dame. A lot of that was scrambles. But they had that one mistake, that one, Riley Mills slants, and they have a bad fit on the second level. That one mistake, it turns into an 89-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
Jashawn Corbin. That, to me, Sean, is why that run fit thing you talked about is so important in this matchup.
That's why this matchup is so intriguing. It really is strength on strength, right? I think Cincinnati is scoring like 19.7 points more than Notre Dame is giving up. And then they're gaining like 76.5 more yards than Notre Dame gives up per game. So like I said, it's strength on strength, and we'll see who wins. Ultimately, the matchup is, as always, up front. But this, you did say this is a different matchup, but I would like to kind of look at it like this. If I'm a great defender, and I just want to use basketball things, if I'm a great defender, and let's say I'm defending your average all-star two guard in the NBA, and I give up 25 points, and the guy is like 11 for 18, right? But he averages 32. Most people would say, man, you did a pretty good job on him, right? And then let's say the next night I defend Michael Jordan, who is all-time great, and I give up 36, but he goes 11 for 30. You could look at that and say, man, Mike got you. But as a defender, I'm like, yo, he was 11 for 30.
Because you created inefficiency.
And that's what, you expect Cincinnati to make plays. And you know they can hurt you more than Wisconsin. You know that.
With individual play, big
individual plays.
Correct.
But if you can cause the havoc and inefficiency in their offense to that level, regardless of how many points they're able to put up because they have more talent, I just look at that being a better defensive performance than you put on the field against Wisconsin. You knew if you stopped the run against Wisconsin, there was nothing they could hurt.
No chance. No chance. None.
And we never felt like they could outscore Notre Dame, even with the struggling offensive line. So
Cincinnati can. And that's
can.
what makes this matchup so good. Cincinnati can outscore Notre Dame if Notre Dame, but this is where this matchup is so important because I don't think Cincinnati can do that if they're one-dimensional. Sean, let's get into the pass game matchup because this is the one that I think is going to be the most intriguing because you have a quarterback that a lot of people are talking about as a potential first-round draft pick, and it doesn't take somebody long to see why he's considered that because he's big, he's athletic, he has a big arm. I think he carries himself in a way on the field that you want a top quarterback to carry himself, meaning when he makes mistakes, you don't see him visibly get upset. I think he stays kind of even keeled. He'll go high, but he never goes low. You know, I mean, anybody goes high when they make a big play. He's got some swagger to him. The physical tools are there. I still am not a Desmond Ritter believer when it comes to just the snap after snap, down after down ability to move the offense efficiently, like you said. He will make some big plays, but the efficiency to me is the key. And that's where Notre Dame has to be more effective. That's what Indiana did. You know, the Indiana was able to get in his face. I mean, the early interception he threw, you know, this number down here to me, Sean, more than any of them is going to be the most important, not just sacks, but the pressures, because if the thing about Desmond Ritter is if he sits in the pocket and he gets comfortable, he will do damage in three ways. Number one, if nobody's open, he can take off and run it, right? Yeah. That's the one that everybody talks about, but he's got a huge arm. Now, he doesn't have the most accurate deep ball, but he only has to hit one of them, you know what I mean, for it to be a big play. He's got a big arm. If you lose contain, if you think – it's kind of like when they played BC last year. There was one big play that BC made because it looked like the DB was thinking, well, he can't throw it over my head from here. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so he kind of came up a little bit, and Phil was like, yeah, I can, and he threw it over his head. Well, that's Desmond Ritter too. Like if you think, well, I'm 50 yards deep, I don't have to go any deeper. Okay, he can throw it 65. You know what I mean? But what you can't let him do is he can't make those throws if he's running around and throwing off his back foot. And to me, at the end of the day, that's where this game is going to come down to for Notre Dame is can you create consistent pass rush against what is a long, big, in my opinion, somewhat slow Cincinnati offensive line. That's going to be the key. Because if his stat line looks like it did last week, Desmond Ritter's, Cincinnati doesn't have a chance in this game. He went 20 of 36, which is 55.6 yards, 210 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I don't think they can beat Notre Dame if he puts up numbers like that. It's going to have to look like week 1 against Miami of Ohio, 20 of 25 for 295 and 4 touchdowns. Yeah. It's going to have to look more like that, in my opinion.
Well, most athletic quarterbacks, most defensive coordinators want to rush them from their strong side,
right,
on the outside, and force them, if they're going to scramble, force them to scramble one way. Like, we're not about to allow you to come up through the defensive line, through the cracks, and make big plays and, you know, put our linebackers in a position where they have to come get you, and it opens up the pass, especially to the 2 tight ends that they have. So, you know, I'm very interested in seeing how Marcus Freeman attacks, because he attacked Graham Mertz one way. Now he knows he has a more mobile quarterback that can hurt him with his arm and his legs. I'm interested in seeing where the blitzes come from. Last week, it came mostly up the middle from the linebackers. They had a couple of cornerback blitzes. I think one was coming and he missed the. That's where they got the big play on the shovel pass, if I'm not mistaken. They called the right play. Just Clarence Lewis just didn't make the tackle, and it goes for a big play. But I'm excited. I'm excited because I'm telling you, man, it's one thing to have a system, But then it's one thing to have good players, develop players, a system, and a coach that can adjust on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And what you've seen from Marcus Freeman, specifically against Jeff Brom and against Paul Chris, is someone that can have a game plan coming into the game, and then one can adjust on the fly in the midst of the game to counter the counter. And that is when you have something special.
Mm-hmm.
And the linebackers have been much better. Kyle Hamilton had an impact on the game. I think you talked about it in the recap show. Like, you look at his numbers, and you say, oh, Kyle Hamilton, but you really look at the tape and you'll see how much of an impact.
Yeah, he had an impact by not having a noticeable impact.
Yes.
And that may sound counterintuitive, but what we mean by that is because of how they used him, the further off the field, it forced Wisconsin to say, okay, Wisconsin was smart enough to say, hey, we're not going to throw it 14. We're not going to run it 14. So that is the impact, because now if I know that you're going to avoid him, then now I know what I can do with my checks and calls as a defensive coordinator. And Marcus Freeman, I thought, did a great job using Kyle Hamilton. And honestly, Sean, to me, that's the reason I didn't understand the freak out after the first couple games.
Mm-hmm.
When everybody's, people always like BVG and all this other stuff, which I just that made me want to scream, because my feelings on BVG, Brian Van Gorder. It was, look, this is a guy still learning his players.
Yeah.
He'd only had 1 and then 2 games with these guys, and then seeing how teams are. Look, let's be honest. He didn't have it, with all due respect to Ahmed Gardner, he didn't have a Kyle Hamilton at Cincinnati. And the reason I say all due respect to Ahmed Gardner, because it's a little different with a corner, because a corner is always going to kind of be in the outside, so there's only so much you can do with him from a game planning standpoint. So what I'm saying is, like, it's not to say Ahmed's not a great player. It's just a safety like Kyle's different than a corner, because Kyle, you can line up everywhere, and you're not going to put Ahmed Gardner in the box and blitz him, right? I mean, it's different with a corner than a safety. And how are teams going to defend this? How are teams going to handle this? How are they going to play this? And I think the thing that gives Notre Dame an advantage in this game compared to most teams against Cincinnati is that Notre Dame has that game changers, that game wreckers on 2 different levels. I don't think they have a game wrecker on the second level. I don't think any of their linebackers are that way. I think their linebackers are great pieces to the bigger puzzle. Yeah. But I think they have game wreckers on level 1 and 3. Meaning, I look at Jason Adamiola, I look at Isaiah Foskey. You're going to see a little bit more from Jordan Patelho this week than you did last week. Then you look at what Myron Tungvalo is really coming along. You have guys, especially with Adamiola and especially Foskey, that can take over a game. Yeah. That's going to be a big key to this, because you talked about where the blitzes are going to come from, and that's important. But for me is first and foremost, where is the front 4 pressure going to come from? That to me is more of where I'm coming from in regards to. Okay. Yes, the blitzes are important, right? But they have to be able to get the front 4 a pass rush, because Cincinnati can get the ball out quickly. And the more athletes that you have chasing the ball, the better. The more athletes that you have to insert into the box to rush the quarterback, then the less athletes you have on the perimeter. And so that's, to me, where I come from. And then you're doing what we've talked about before, which is you're blitzing because you want to, not because you have to. And so I think the front 4 pass rush is going to be super important. What I'm curious about, you talked about wanting to see the blitzes, and that'll be interesting. The other angle that I want to focus on is, what does he do with his pass rush? Because there's really 3 things he could do. Okay. Number 1 is just attack and just try to get in his face and get him, right? That works, but the couple snaps you miss, that's when he takes off. Yeah. Or they catch you in a screen, and they throw that tunnel right behind you. The other one is to try to really attack hard off the edge to try to force them into the pocket. And then you have your interior guys kind of pushing, but they're more read and react than penetrating, right? Because then they're going to get off and chase them. The other way is to kind of, and that's to try to force them to climb into the pocket more. The other way is to sort of have a more level edge approach, where you kind of come hard to where there is nowhere for him to step up in the pocket and he has to scramble outside. So what do you do? What is your focus there? I think that is something I'm interested in. I think you can make a case for all 3 being advantages. The first one, the all attack, let's just go your front 4. Yes, you're vulnerable to some big plays, but I think you also create more negatives. You create more second and longs, more third and longs. the advantage to the second one is you keep him from running around, but I think it also gives him the ability to climb in the pocket and throw, which is where some big plays can come from. The third is to me, I feel like a combination of 1 and 3 is what I like, because I feel like I look at Desmond Ritter in defending him a lot like how I would have told teams to defend Ian Book, which is you want him to sit in you want him to stay in the pocket. You don't want him getting out of the pocket or stepping into the pocket and taking off. Make him beat you with his reads and his arm. And when teams are able to keep Ian Book in the pocket but still get a push, that's when Ian Book was least effective. I think Desmond Ritter and Ian Book have a lot of similarities in how they play the game, in my opinion. And that is their best. They're at their best when they can somewhat freelance within the context of who they are, not freelancing because, oh my gosh, I'm avoiding this guy and then I have to avoid that guy, right? So I think keeping him in the pocket, Indiana, I thought, did a pretty good job of that, of rushing in a way that they were coming right up the middle, but there was nowhere to go on the outside either. And so they were forcing him to throw off balance. That's the approach that Marcus Freeman takes there from a pressure standpoint is going to be the most important, is going to be the most intriguing thing for me in this matchup, to see how does he get pressure on Desmond Ritter, and then how does that impact your coverage structure? Because that to me is, I don't want to let him have time to get those deep shots off, because I do think they have enough playmakers that they can. Alec Pierce can win one-on-one matchups on the outside. He reminds me a lot of like Javon McKinley. He's their Javon McKinley. Michael Young can make plays after the catch. The other kid they have, who's for some unholy reason, his name is escaping me right now, Tyler Scott, is a fast kid that can stretch the field. They have that unique complement of weapons. And then, of course, Josh Wiley and Leonard Taylor at tight end are really good over the middle pieces. So because they have so many different weapons, I feel like if you have to bring 5 and 6, that puts you into maybe more one-on-ones than you'd like to be in against a quarterback with this kind of arm. And it just goes back to why I think the front 4 pressure is so important in this game.
Yeah, because last week, you never like to say this, right? You find out that your captain and Clog in the middle is not going to be there against Wisconsin, right? And you say to yourself, like, man, that's kind of huge. And it ended up being a blessing in disguise because of what you said. Wisconsin's big, but they're not athletic. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is use our athleticism to get in the gaps, get into the backfield, totally disrupt what they want to do with that offensive line and cause havoc, and then put the games in the hands of Graham Mertz. And they did a great job for 60 minutes. So now Kurt Hinish is supposed to be back, gives you more depth. So now what do you want to do with that defensive line? Last week it was all about speed.
Yeah, it had to be.
Had to be all about speed.
Yeah.
This offensive line, like you said, they're big, but just like Wisconsin, not as athletic. But it's not about the power running game. Now it's about being more diverse with your pass rush.
Yeah, it's a more finesse, because it's a more finesse offense.
Yes, yeah. And you talked about Ian Book. The one thing we would see is that when you kept Ian Book, and when Ian Book had to pat the ball one or two times, and that's what you want to see. You want to see Desmond Ritter patting the ball.
Right.
You know, you want to take
away.
away.
Do a second read. You want to see his head going like this. Because
And the more times you make him do that, you venture to say you're probably going to get a couple of opportunities to make big plays and create turnovers. I think Justin and Isaiah have big games from the outside linebacker position. I really do. I think Justin and Isaiah have big. I think they both get sacks, and I think we have a pocket that closes in.
Mm-hmm.
Keep them in.
So you're thinking kind of outside in is what you're thinking.
Yeah.
So what are you saying, Sean? Is you're thinking like use those edge rushers to then funnel them back into Hinish and Jason Adamiola and Ryan Mills and those guys? Okay.
Exactly. Because if Jason Adamiola is getting 1-on-1, he's winning.
No chance.
He's winning. No chance. The way that kid is playing right now, nobody on that offensive line in the interior 3 has a chance against him.
If Wisconsin's kids couldn't block him,
yes,
Cincinnati's kids cannot block him.
Yes, and Howard Cross was getting into the backfield.
Great to see Jacob Lacey back this week as well.
Absolutely.
And I think with Lacey and Heinisch, you do have more of an ability to control the nose in the pass rush that you really – because Howard, you want to use him like you use Jason. It's go, get upfield, and he's really good at that. If they were forced to kind of say, hey, we need to kind of – we need to be able to hold up here, they didn't really have that opportunity last week.
No.
They do now with Kurt and then to a degree Jacob Lacey. So that I think they have the ability this week to execute that game plan you're referring to more than I don't think they could have done that last week.
No.
I think they would have had to be inside out last week because of the way that they were penetrating. I think I think there's clearly a more opportunity for that this week. I think the other advantage to that too, Sean, is if you're able to do that, you can drop 7, you can drop 6 because Cincinnati does have good enough playmakers. And this is why all summer you and I talked, privately about Wisconsin several times. The thing I kept saying is they do not have the athletes to beat Notre Dame.
No.
The only chance they could beat Notre Dame is if Notre Dame makes mistakes. And we saw that on Saturday. The only time I really felt like Wisconsin threatened Notre Dame, even when it was 10-10, I wasn't, honestly, I truly wasn't worried because I was like, well, they may not score again, and Notre Dame's going to at least get a field goal or two.
Right.
It was when Notre Dame turned the ball over. And that was when they took the lead in the fourth quarter. Yeah. When Notre Dame didn't make mistakes like that, they really controlled that game, in my opinion, much more so than the score actually. Like, it was the weirdest 10-10 game ever because I felt like Notre Dame was thoroughly outplaying at that point in time. It was just, they had missed a field goal. You had the turnover. You had some, Jack missed a couple throws. You had a couple plays here and there where you're like, man, come on, guys, you're better than that. With Cincinnati,
didn't I text you at halftime and say this game shouldn't be this close?
Oh, absolutely, and you were absolutely right. It was like it was like 10-3, and it was like this game should. I actually had to pull it up. It was something like this. This should be a blowout. Like they should be blowing them out right now. But you were absolutely right in that game. You said game shouldn't be this close. Yeah, what you said. And that was at halftime and you were absolutely right because it was like you just felt like Notre Dame was controlling the action the whole game. Outside of that, really that one big play that Wisconsin had, it just was like, they're not really doing anything on Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, however, has the skill players that they can hurt Notre Dame more if Notre Dame either A, brings too many. It just takes one mistake, one guy slipping, one guy using the wrong technique, one guy biting on a double move, and you don't have any safety help, and it's a touchdown for Cincinnati. That's why I think it's important to see early on to probe them in a way that says, hey, can we dominate them with 4 and 5? That to me is the key.
How does this have the vibe? And I said this, and I think it's apples and oranges because I think it's a different type of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling the vibe of when the NC State team came into Notre Dame. Now we know that team, that version of Notre Dame was a better team than this year's version to this point because we have to see how the year plays out.
Yeah, because by that point in time, that Notre Dame offense was rolling.
Yes.
At that point.
Yes. And it was like North Carolina State was trying to elevate itself. They had a first-round pick in Bradley Chubb. They had other weapons that could hurt you on offense. I forget the quarterback's name, but he was Finley.
Yeah, Ryan Finley.
Ryan Finley was a solid quarterback, good coach. They were trying to elevate their program to get up to the next level in the ACC. It was a huge game for them to prove themselves, and they had been coming for the previous 2 years. I'm getting that vibe from Cincinnati as well. Like they're trying to prove themselves, trying to build up. And it's just like, I remember early in that game, it was the special teams that got NC State comfortable. Well, they blocked the punt for the touchdown, right? I think they blocked the punt for the touchdown, and then the game was very competitive.
I think they took a lead at that point in time, right?
Yeah, they did take a lead.
Yeah. And
that, for me, I think the defense can control this game, will control this game. I don't know what Cincinnati's going to have to dig deep for, whether it's special teams. And they hurt Indiana in their special teams with the kickoff return touchdown and a couple of big punt returns.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself is more – I worry about that, honestly, rather than both units out on the field going up against Cincinnati's unit. I worry more about the intangibles, special teams, and the trick plays and those types of things that can really change the flow of the game and make Cincinnati comfortable.
And that's why this matchup is so important, Sean, because I think if this is where those plays will come from.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the tricks will come from. This is where they can do things with their offense to negate the strengths of Notre Dame. You know, if they're able to get the ball out quickly, if Notre Dame doesn't tackle well in space,
right?
You know, if Notre Dame's linebackers aren't as good in getting up underneath the tight ends and the in cuts and the things like that they were last week and they were against Purdue. If you have to bring Kyle Hamilton down to defend the screen game or the run game, it exposes you. You're more vulnerable down the field. There's all the aspects that if Notre Dame doesn't perform well in this matchup, you know, this one right here, that is where all of a sudden now the run game gets going a little bit, you know, and so it's kind of like you can shut down the run game that I think then helps you win in the pass game. But if you shut down the run game and they're gashing you in the pass game, then you have to then alter to do things with your coverages or your linebackers. Then all of a sudden the run game opens back up and now you're back to square one. So that's why I think it's so important. Number one, the front four has to get a good pass rush. That is so important to this game. And then number two, they have to be disciplined on the back end. That's the key. You can't bite on double moves because, hey, this team will double move you. They will run post-snap switches that are going to mess up your coverage if you're not communicating correctly. They're going to attack your linebackers with their tight ends because both of these tight ends can flat out play.
Yeah.
And you know, Leonard Taylor was the guy that had a Notre Dame offer. Yeah. Josh Wiley was the guy that Notre Dame recruited a little bit out of the Cincinnati area. Both are good football players that I think have a chance to play professional football. So, you know, and Alec Pierce is, again, he reminds me a lot of Javon McKinley. No, he's not a burner and all that, but he's a good route runner. He can win contested throws. He's a good football player. And, you know, and if you don't play the ball right, all of a sudden you think you're in great coverage. If as Clarence Lewis or Cam Hard, Trick Brayson, all of a sudden, you know, he's putting that, you know, Desmond's putting that ball on the back shoulder and Alec is out playing you for the football. Those are the things that concern me about this matchup. Can they make enough of those chunk plays and take advantage of enough Notre Dame mistakes to keep this a ball game? Because the thing that concerns me is the only reason I think that Cincinnati has a chance in this game is because I don't have a lot of faith in Notre Dame offense right now.
Yeah.
To where in the past, 24, 27 points, if you struggle, doesn't get you beat because you win 40-24, 35-24. This game, however, if the Notre Dame offense doesn't play a lot better than it did the last 2 weeks, 24-27 points can beat you. And they don't need to make but 4 or 5 big plays to get to 24-27 points.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, Sean, is the important thing. Now, the other important thing to me is Desmond Ritter, in my opinion, and you've watched Cincinnati this year, and I want to get your thoughts on this. He's got 3 picks so far, right? Or is it only 2? Or does the backup quarterback have 1? He's got 2. The backup quarterback has 1. Desmond's got 2 in 3 games. Yeah, I thought he should have had 3 of them against Indiana. Yes. And to me, I look at the Georgia game last year. I look at some of the bigger games he's played in. He will put the ball up in ways where I'm like, that should have been intercepted.
Yeah.
There's going to be some opportunities for that because Notre Dame, I mean, right now, what they're doing interception-wise, you can say, well, you know, they had 4 last game. That's a lot. But they had 5 in 3 games.
3 games, yeah.
You know, so it's not like they just had that one game that kind of padded their interception numbers. They're what they did in this last game kind of, you know, made it insane. But they've had 3 of their 4 games. They've had at least 2 interceptions. The only team that they didn't pick off was Toledo. They picked Florida State off 3 times. They picked Purdue off twice, and they picked Wisconsin off 4 times. That's going to be a key too, and that's going to get us into our final category, Sean, which is the scoring offense against the scoring defense. And to me, a lot of these numbers are a lot more evenly matched than they look right now. And again, I think Notre Dame's first couple games makes this look a little less close, right? Yeah. A lot of this, however, is close. I mean, Notre Dame's got a really good you see this right here. Notre Dame has a really good red zone defense. Cincinnati's a really good red zone offense against inferior opponents. Notre Dame has an advantage here on 3rd down, right here, right there, 3rd down. Cincinnati, not a great 3rd down team, which is further evidence that they have lived off of big plays this season, yes. Sean. But this down here is to me you had mentioned this earlier. This to me is going to be a big part of this game is can Notre Dame create inefficiency on the Cincinnati offense, which means a lot of stuffs in the run game and a lot of incompletions in the pass game. Can they get the ball? And more importantly, can they get it early? If they can force a turnover early in this game, I think it rattles Cincinnati. Because here's the big thing, and you know this to be true, Sean, at the professional level, at the college level, at the high school level, if you run your mouth and you go into an opponent's environment and you make a big early mistake, that can shake people.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the thing that Notre Dame can do. If Notre Dame can force an early turnover, force an early mistake, get the ball, and then, of course, the offense has to go punch it in, that is where all of a sudden you can start to see Cincinnati say, uh-oh, maybe we're not as good as we think we. That's when that doubt creeps in.
Yeah.
So to me, that's going to be a big part of this game. Cincinnati cannot beat Notre Dame if they turn the ball over. I don't think they can stay close with Notre Dame if they turn the ball over.
I agree. I think we're looking at, can Notre Dame's patience create Cincinnati's impatience?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that goes back to the discipline. Being disciplined, fundamentally sound, assignment sound football on defense, dictating to them what you want them to do, forcing them to play outside of the first two options, going to option 3 and 4. And in doing that, you cause them to be impatient, because Desmond Ritter, I'll say this, he's an impatient quarterback. What I mean by that, and it goes to what you just said about their stats, they live off the big play.
Mm-hmm.
They want to create the big play. They want to shoot the threes in a sense. And if they're missing threes early, they're not going to stop shooting them. They're going to keep going for the big plays. And if they keep going for the big plays, it's going to create opportunities for sacks, strip sacks, fumbles, all types of turnovers. And if they do that, and you put Notre Dame's offense on a short field, that helps out that Notre Dame offense and gives them confidence. And then they can go for the big plays and try to work the ball down the field. But also, time of possession. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I know how you feel about the offensive line, my friend. I know how you feel.
Do you disagree with me at all?
No.
Okay.
I just bring positivity in my thoughts. That's all.
All right, that's fair.
We
that's
feel
fair.
the exact same way. I just choose to be more positive and to think that one day
you like putting slipstick on that pig is what you're saying, right?
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
Fair enough. Correct. That's why I like you, I'm always being critical. I got to bring a little sunshine into my life. You know what I mean? So that's why we're friends.
We're just trying, we always can't get the blue ribbon.
Right.
With our offensive lines here in Notre Dame. They all can't be great. Sometimes we have to accept
They don't have to be great. They just need to not suck.
But listen, Brian, if you look around college football, this is Clemson's dealing with the same.
But problem. Clemson has never had a great offensive line.
That's true. That's true. I'm just saying there are a lot of teams dealing with bad offensive lines, and we haven't been used to it.
But no great teams other than Clemson. Like if Notre Dame had offensive line from Ohio State right now, which has been just okay.
They've been okay. Yeah.
But if Notre Dame just had an okay offensive line, they'd be scoring 45 points a game right now.
If Notre Dame had an offensive line from last year.
Yeah. Well, even if they had the 18 offensive line, they don't even need – I mean, if they had last year's offensive line, I think this team could win a championship. They don't have that. I mean, but I don't think they need that. They just need – but anyway, back to your point before I get you too off tangent.
No, we're right on tangent. We're right there. We're right there. I'm telling you. Privately, we both –
Yes.
From execution, coaching, we're on the same path and wavelength about the offensive line. My belief is that at some point, this team is going to have a game at the offensive line where you say, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100% agree with you on that.
Now,
it's going to click. The light's going to go on.
The crazy thing, Brian, is it literally might come from the youngsters. It might be the youngsters getting more game experience that finally make the O-line.
And it'll happen in a big game. It won't be against Navy, or it'll happen in a big game. It'll either be Saturday, or it'll be USC, or it'll be a big game. It won't be like, oh, they finally got going against Navy or Stanford or something like that. It'll be a big game.
I don't know if it's that game, but
if it is,
If
it is,
Kyron
Sean,
Williams
it
runs
won't
for
be close.
120 on Saturday, it's
Sean,
not even
if
close.
Kyron Williams runs for 60 on Saturday, I think Notre Dame is. I mean, they ran for 3 yards last week. I mean, they beat Wisconsin by 28 and ran for 3 freaking yards.
I'm interested in seeing what the prop bet for Kyron Williams over under is for Saturday.
Yeah. I just hope that Jerome Ford doesn't go for 100 yards, and ultimately at the end of the day, that's kind of where I see this one. So, Sean, can you stay for a few minutes afterwards, or do you need to run real quick?
No, I'm
so
good.
let's wrap up this part of it, because I do think we can get into, because you didn't have a chance to talk about the Notre Dame offense, because yesterday we did that show, you weren't a part of it. So I want to wrap up. This is obviously the end of the breakdown of the Notre Dame defense and how they stack up against the Cincinnati offense. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Because Sean and I are going to talk a little bit about the Notre Dame offense, and then get to a few questions, because Sean doesn't get a chance often to answer y'all's questions, and you get a chance to ask Sean questions. We'll do that first. So that's it. Advantage run game, Sean. Who are you giving it to? I'm going Notre Dame.
Notre Dame as well.
Advantage pass game. This one I'm struggling with, Sean. Part of me wants to give the advantage to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But because the mobile nature of Desmond Ritter, and the fact that it's been an issue for Notre Dame, it was an issue against Florida State. It was an issue against obviously throughout Clark Lee's tenure. Makes me want to go even, just because I want to see a little bit more, and the fact that this is a team that has more. Purdue had a better receiver than anybody Cincinnati has. But I would say that Cincinnati's second, third, fourth, and fifth options are probably better than Purdue's. That's another difference. But, we saw Florida State had some athletes that are similar to Cincinnati, and they made some big plays in that game. So I'm not ready to give Notre Dame the advantage in the pass game just yet. What say you, Sean? Who do you give the advantage to?
I would think push.
Okay. So you're kind of the same page I'm at on that one.
I would think push even, but I'll tell you why I do give the edge in the pass game, and that is knowing that sneaky, accurate quarterback could have opportunities and miss the throws.
Yes.
So
if the pass rush is good, and that's ultimately, if Notre Dame wins that battle, it will be because of what happened.
That could be the key, and then the other key that the ultimate chess piece once again on defense for Marcus Freeman every week is 14.
He's going to have a second one coming up here soon, and it's number 12.
Yeah.
Because he's going to be able to use Isaiah or Jordan Botelho in a lot of different ways.
As
a rotation guy with Foskey, he's going to be able to use him in a lot of different ways. And that's going to be very interesting to see how they use him moving forward.
Can you imagine how good this defense would have been if Maris and Jordan were healthy from game one?
Maris, I'm going to say that's an interesting one, because I feel like the will linebacker position has still been really freaking good.
Oh, absolutely.
Where I would have wanted to see Maris is what could he have brought as a pass rusher. To me, where I think they're missing Maris is in the nickel as a pass rusher. I think first and second down, they don't miss Maris. Now, next year I could see Maris and JD playing together. We've talked about that. But having Botelho all fall camp and the first couple games going into the game where it's his fifth game, how you use him. And I mean, there's times we're seeing in nickel where they got basically 3D tackles on the field. I'm hoping that as Jordan gets healthier, that kind of goes away, and it's Myron and Jason inside, and it's Isaiah and Jordan on the outside, or Isaiah and Justin on the outside, or Jordan and Justin on the outside with Isaiah Foskey inside. I think it gives you so many more options. Because other than Isaiah, there aren't really any pass rushers on the edge.
No.
When he's not there. I mean, Jordan and Isaiah are the edge pass rushers for this defense. And that's the other thing, too, is Notre Dame is on pace for almost 50 sacks this year, and they've had Jordan Botelho for one game.
Hey, kudos. You have to give the shift and the change. And from a coaching standpoint, you can speak to this, because I don't know how difficult it is going from inside in a 4-man front to going outside and sometimes what is a 3-man front. What Myron Myron has done,
yes,
and the impact he's made, the leadership he's shown,
while going through a personal
while
tragedy.
going through personal tragedy.
Yeah.
You have to tip your cap to that kid. He has been
I'm
absolutely
43. I'm 43, and if God forbid I lost my father at my age, it would shake me.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine being 21 and being a student at Notre Dame and a player at Notre Dame and losing my father, who was very close with. The focus and the mature. I mean, it just says what a great job his dad did raising him, and just what a mature young man Myron is. But no, he's been great. But I don't view Myron as like that edge rusher,
right?
You know, he's just a really good all around player. Now he can get a rush on first and second down, but I'm intrigued to see that, and I think that's going to have a big impact in this.
You know what, Brian? Remember that this gets to the crust of what I was talking about. Let's just let the people inside some of our conversations right quick. About 3 weeks ago, I texted you and I said, "Yo, I have a great idea for a story, and I think we should write it together." And I talked about watching what we're seeing now. But even though the players we're watching in those positions are showing us the actual ceiling for that position, even though they might not be able to reach that ceiling. So you're looking at Myron performing, and you just talked about his skill set. Might not be the best skill set for that position. But now I want you to insert Keon Keeley.
Tyson Ford.
Aiden
Guerrera.
Now let's talk about what it will be in a year or two.
Right.
And that's what
that's the exciting thing about this. And this was my let's wrap this part of it up because I wanted to get into that conversation, Sean. So that's going to be it for the breakdown of the Notre Dame defense against the Cincinnati offense. So obviously we're not going anywhere, but that's going to wrap up that part. But Sean, here's the part about. So thank you for joining us. We're gonna get right into this for that part. But so we're gonna go off script a little bit here, Sean.
Yeah,
because that's what you and I do. We always have these conversations where it starts about I'm calling about one thing, and by the time the conversation's over, we're not talking. We're like, what did I call you again for?
Right.
That's the thing that kind of frustrated me with Clark Lee. Is because he was such a great coach, and I was like, imagine if you could put elite players in that system. Like, look what he did when he had those, like Isaiah Foskey and Jerry Tillery, and it's like, why aren't you spending more time trying to recruit those elite players? And again, I don't care about 5 stars, 4 stars. I mean, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was a 3-star. It's more about just find the elite upside guys. Well, Marcus Freeman's doing that. He's going out there, and some of them are highly ranked guys, some of them aren't. He's going out there and getting those long, athletic, high-ceiling players. I mean, you look at Notre Dame now, and you say Isaiah Foskey looks like a giant out there because he's 6'5", and Kurt's 6'2", Jason's 6'3", Myron 6'2.5", Nana 6'3", Jordan 6'2". You have some taller guys, Riley Mills is 6'5", but then Jacob Lacey's 6'2", Howard Cross is 6'1".
Yeah.
And then you look at the kids that they're bringing in next year. Well, even this year, Jason Onye 6'5", Gabriel Rubio 6'5". Next year, Tyson Ford 6'6", Aiden Guerrera 6'6", Anthony Lucas, who they're trying to recruit, 6'5", Hero Canoe 6'4", guys that they're trying to recruit. Keon Keeley 6'6", he's a flipping pterodactyl. I mean, I don't know if you've seen his junior film yet, Sean. It's impressive. I mean, his length and explosiveness is, and then Brendan Vernon 6'5". I said this on the message board. To me, Keon Keeley is a combination of Foskey and Julian Okwara. I think he's kind of got Foskey's body. Foskey's a little bit broader, but similar. But he's got Julian's explosiveness, in my opinion. And Brendan Vernon, to me, is almost a cookie cutter of Khalid Kareem. I mean, when I see him, because Khalid was never an explosive athlete either. I mean, he wasn't, but he was a long, powerful, edge defender, and that's how I see Brendan Vernon. And you're talking about Tyson Ford is 6'6", Aiden Guerrera is 6'6". They're going to be huge up front. Yeah. Imagine trying to have to throw over those flipping giants, and that's the thing that excites you to say, boy, if they can keep Marcus Freeman here long enough to allow him to coach those guys, and then you get on the second level and you think of the athleticism that they're bringing in next year at linebacker with Josh Burnham and Jalen Sneed and Nolan Ziegler. And was it you that I texted the other day? Like, this would have been the perfect, Wisconsin was like the perfect game to have Junior Tuihalamaka.
No. Yep.
Like, I can't wait to watch that kid against Stanford in teams like this, you know. And then you've got Devin Moore, who's a 6'3" corner, Benjamin Morrison, who's a tremendous. I mean, you just said, man, imagine what he's going to have when he starts getting those kind of guys in here. You know, it's really exciting, you know. And then Ryan Barnes is older, and you know that's the thing that encourages me. The longer they can keep Marcus Freeman here, the better, because if they can keep him for just, let's say, 3 seasons, and he leaves to become the next head coach at wherever, assuming it's not Notre Dame,
right?
Just for the sake of argument, whoever steps into this job is just going to have. I mean, it's going to have it's scary how good.
Full pantry, just a full pantry.
And we haven't even got into 2023 where they've already got, the linebacker. I mean, they've got Keeley and Brandon Vernon, but they got Malik Muhammad's visiting this weekend.
Yeah.
Drake Bowen's visiting this weekend. Sonny Styles is visiting this weekend. I mean, it's a fun to see. It's amazing. Imagine, I don't know what happened. Maybe they lessen the academic standards, I say sarcastically.
Yeah.
Since Marcus Freeman's been hired, I say incredibly sarcastically. But that's the exciting thing, Sean, is that you're seeing that talent level really take off at Notre Dame. The offensive talent kind of has always been there. They're just not always utilizing it correctly. And that, to me, is about this season, back to this season. To me, this is what I want to give you a chance to speak on, because you started to hint on it earlier. And real quick, we did have a super chat. Matt Baisley, thank you for this. Y'all reading anything into Georgia game, and that 8-ish Georgia starters didn't even play? No, I don't, because you had a full month to prepare, and you were replacing those starters with guys who were just as highly ranked as the other ones were. And JT Daniels was still the quarterback. Yeah. So I don't make too much of that. I think that's an excuse that Georgia always uses when they don't play well in a bowl game. We didn't have it. Well, that's, you had a month to prepare without those guys.
And I think Cincinnati, they proved in that game that the same thing we'll see Saturday. You're going to see a team that's going to compete.
Yes.
They
will not be afraid of Notre Dame.
You're going to have to win this game. And Notre Dame is well equipped to do it, and to do it convincingly. But they have to take the field, and they have to play and execute.
Yeah. So, Sean, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the offensive matchup, because you said something, and I know it's something that you and I have discussed privately, but I want to allow you to share your thoughts with people here. And I don't know if you guys have had a chance to talk about it much on your podcast with Malik, but I think you're right. Is Notre Dame is got to be able to weather this storm until the offense figures it out.
Yeah.
Because if they can keep winning, and that's the impressive thing is, you want to know I got to stop saying this, because we're affiliated with them in certain forms. But I read an article at SI, I think it was by Pat Forty, and he talked about how this isn't one of Brian Kelly's more talented teams. I think it was Pat Forty.
Yeah.
And then I read it on ESPN. They're just winning ugly, and they're making these thoughts of, well, they just lack talent. I'm thinking, no, they don't. And the evidence for that is they're 4-0, despite having an offensive line that's been every bit as bad, if not worse, than what Clemson has.
Yeah.
And I would argue it's just as bad. But yet Clemson, with all their 5-star quarterbacks and 5-star receivers and 5-star running backs, these guys can't score on offense at all. In Notre Dame's bad game on offense was still 21 points against one of the best, or 20 points against one of the best defenses in college football.
Yeah.
And recently in Wisconsin. I mean, you take away the special teams, take away the defensive scores, Notre Dame still scored 20 points on offense on Saturday.
Yeah.
Against a Wisconsin defense that doesn't give up. I mean, that's one of the best scoring defenses in college football. So,
yeah,
they're doing that, and yet Clemson scoring 14 on Georgia Tech. They're scoring 3 against Georgia. So you don't do that if you're not talented. Notre Dame's played 3 Power 5 teams so far, and they've beat all of them, because that is the skill level. You want to know a stat that I had in my midweek musings today, Sean? Last year, Notre Dame through 4 games had 7 pass plays of at least 20 yards. 7. This year they have 17. Notre Dame did not get to 17 pass plays of at least 20 yards until they played Clemson in November. So you don't do that because you're lucky. You do that because you're talented. And it's not just one. And if you go look at the big plays he had last year, most of them were by Javon McKinley.
Yes.
Right? This year, your longest play is Avery Davis to 62 yards. Your second longest is a tie between Chris Tyree and Kyron Williams, and your fourth longest is Michael Mayer. It's four different guys at three different positions are making your big plays. Notre Dame is incredibly talented. That's what makes the offensive line so frustrating. To your point, what is it going to look like that one game where all of a sudden the light goes on? And again, what does that mean for the offensive line? It's getting a body on a body and sustaining blocks. It's not dominating. It's not looking like the 2017 line. It's not looking like last year's line. It's about just doing your job. When that happens, because now what we don't know is if it will sustain. Is it just going to be a game and then the next week they're back to what they were, or do they build off that? But the game that happens, I don't care who on their schedule that is. It could be Cincinnati to you, whoever's on their schedule from here to the end of the year. If that happens and that line clicks, it won't be close.
Yeah, and we don't know when it will be happening. I agree with you that it's going to be in one of the big games that it does happen. And I feel like it's going to be the youngsters that are spearheading that. Pat Forty, anybody from the national media that looks at this team, there's no way you can convince me that Notre Dame doesn't have. I'm talking about pass catching group. They have to have one of the top 10 pass catching groups in all of college football.
There's no question. No question.
Yeah, Mr. Do It Everything physical receiver in Kevin Austin. You have a guy that can clearly take the top off of any defense. I haven't seen a DB that can run with him.
Not consistently.
Braden
Wisconsin did it once, but then Braden beat him 2-3 other times.
He's blown by everybody that's faced him multiple times in every game. Avery Davis can do damage. Steady. And no, you're not defending Michael Mayer.
You have to commit so many resources to him like Purdue did that you leave yourself exposed to getting beat by everybody else.
Yeah, that's why their safety was talking so much garbage. And I'm like, dude, you're getting under help.
Right.
It's not like you're just defending him one-on-one. Right. Like, stop pointing your finger. It's like you're not doing anything.
And while you're talking, Avery Davis is running by you for a 62-yard touchdown.
And Braden Lindsey is dropping another one in the end zone. So the talent is there. Mm-hmm. And that just goes back to how important the offensive line is. Like, you can have all the talent in the world, and if your offensive line can't create the opportunity to go ahead and take advantage of the talent, but I think I was talking to you. No, I was talking to Vince, and I said, Vince, we're not asking for much. We're just really asking for half a second better each week in the passing game.
Right.
So by the time we get to Cincinnati or by the time we get to North Carolina, now we're giving them a full second and a half longer to throw the ball than they're getting now. So it could be worse, right? It could be the Bears' offensive line.
Yeah.
Giving up 9 sacks a game.
It's kind of what it looked like, I mean,
you're right.
They gave up like 6 or 7 last week.
Brian, were you upset? Not upset, but Tommy Rees and the way he we knew they had to pass the ball. They couldn't just line up and run the ball against that front seven. Mm-hmm. So coming out and saying we're going to pass the ball 45 to 50 times as a game plan, totally understandable.
Right.
But at some point, the tight end is going to have to chip. Something's going to have to be done. You're going to have to throw a screen to slow up this pass rush just to go straight past pro right out the gate. And let that offensive line get confidence. Yeah. I was puzzled.
I thought he should have done on the first series what he did on the second series. If you go back and look at the second series when they went right down the field, the first I'm trying to think, it was like the first sack of the second series. I think he got sacked on the first down. Sacked on first down, made it first 17. It was kind of a quick throw, but it was a stationary throw. Right, which didn't really work. And stationary meaning like the routes. And he gets sacked. And then they come out the next play and they just do 4 verts and he hits his drop and he hits it. And then the next play they go in motion, he drops back and he hit. And they started just getting the ball out quick. Not quick meaning Jack Cohn's got to make quick decisions, but the play calls gave him the opportunity to get the ball out quick, which some of the earlier plays did not. I think, Sean, I mean, obviously doing some Max Pro stuff would be fine, but at the end of the day, that's not the answer for me. The answer for me is use your strengths to attack it, because the problem is if you put an extra tight end in to help Chip, you now have less weapons in the pass game. Number one.
Right.
Number two, if you keep Michael Mayer in to block, then you've taken your best player out of the pass game. I'd like to see Notre Dame use their speed and athleticism to attack pressures more swing screens, more tunnel screens, more things with the backs to try to get teams to come up and have to defend them. And then that opens up some of those intermediate stuff where it's you're hitting your drop and you're letting it go. And then when you get shots on the outside, take more of those shots. But also don't just do those things. Do some post-snap things where you can get some wheel routes. They ran like one real wheel route on – They run like one or two wheel routes a game. When they run them, they work. They ran one in the first series against Toledo, and he hit Michael Mayer for a 28-yard game as he was getting drilled, because it was just hit your drop. You got the one-on-one, throw it to Michael Mayer. Did the same thing to Joe Wilkins this past weekend. So when Tommy does stuff like that, it works. The problem that I think Tommy Rees has, Sean, is we've chatted about this on the show before. He kind of goes into each game planning as if like he's hoping that the line finally plays better. And he has to go into the game thinking they're not going to play well, have a plan for it, and then adjust accordingly if they're actually playing well. That's what he needs to do. And I think that's where some of his inexperience is coming from. And not just inexperience, but in his defense, he's never coached or played on a line this bad. And look, there's only, so that's something I would like to see him do is, hey, game plan early in a way that's going to attack the pass rush, assuming that your offensive line is going to suck. And then if they don't suck, you have some things you can then dial up. You can then expand your offense. So I would have the script be quick game screens and shots. And some of those, here's the frustrating thing for me is, why aren't you moving the pocket?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot easier to get a pass rush when you know where the quarterback's going to be every time you drop back to throw the ball. I mean, every time the ball snapped, you got a 99% chance that Jack Cohn is going to be standing right there. What are some of the plays that he made in the spring game against Florida State? I mean, one of the bigger, that bootleg to Braden Lindsey, hits Braden Lindsey coming, across the middle. Jack can throw on the run. He had a great bootleg hitting George Takis on the run, on the move, coming across the field in the blue gold game.
Yeah.
He can do it. If you want to do max pros, then don't do max pros in your just pure drop back game or your shotgun play action that isn't really fooling anybody. Do it off of a pistol or a true bootleg. And because teams are still going to react when you try to run the ball. I mean, if you maybe, I'm not saying go under center, because I don't think it necessarily needs to be an under center team. And I don't necessarily want to get Jack Cohn closer to the defensive line right now. But you can do it from pistol, or you can ride an outside zone and then boot outside, as opposed to that slow kind of downhill play action they're doing now, where he's not getting any depth because he's doing that play action and then he's stuck standing straight up.
Yeah.
Do that play action and then drop back if you want to do those deeper throws. So I think that's things he has to adjust. And Purdue has done that at times when their pass rush is struggling, and they did against Notre Dame, where they would play action out of the gun and then backpedal in the shotgun. Notre Dame's play faking, and then he's just taking a step back, and you're right there.
Right there.
Play action and then drop back to let those routes develop. Because like the red zone play where he got sacked, he's standing there as the routes are still being run, and it's like, the longer you stand there, the closer the pass rush is going to get to you.
Yeah.
Do that. Take your drop. That's going to let some of those longer developing pass plays develop more.
Yeah.
And then you've got more room to throw. Those are the little kind of adjustments that I would rather see him do, as opposed to taking Avery Davis off the field and putting in a second tight end, or using Michael Mayer as a pass blocker. I would rather see him do some of those things, because then that's going to naturally force you to slow down your pass rush as a defense. Like, hey, look, they're moving the pocket. We're bringing 5 up the middle. He's getting outside, or they're max proing on first down and they're doing these deep drops. We can't get to him, and he's throwing it over a head, or those type of things are things that I want to see. And for the love of Pete, use your speed guys more. Use Braden Lindsey and Chris Tyree in more ways. Now,
the one thing I will say this, if I don't see, I don't have that much hair, people, as you can see, but the hair that I do have, I'm going to pull out.
It's another reason we get along, Sean.
Yes. I'm going to pull it out. If I don't see the way Indiana was able to attack the Cincinnati defense with misdirection, reverses, and jet sweeps. If I don't see a jet sweep or some type of misdirection on Saturday from Tommy Rees, I'm going to pull my hair out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's just no way. Like you said, you have to use your weapons. Can we get rid of the pistol formation and just pistol formation run up the middle? Can we stop? You have a running back that is a patient running back that needs to see the crease and put his foot in the ground and go.
Mm-hmm.
Can we go left or right?
Right.
And let him be effective.
Yeah, if you're going to go pistol, stretch, run outside zone, toss it.
Thank you.
Right, no question.
You have to.
And then that sets up what I was just talking about, Sean, though. That sets up more of those bootlegs. Because what teams have been doing, right, and I'm interrupting you here, but what teams have been doing is when they see that stretch out of the pistol, they're crashing the crap out of the backside of that, right? So now you got that slower developing looking run. Yeah. If they're crashing it, then the next play, you call Jack, you boot him out, and now all of a sudden, you've got room to do something with it.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree. If you're going to go pistol, do not run inside zone.
Don't run inside zone.
At least not that much. Run it as a complement to the other things, And
I just think Tom early in the first half, his red zone play calling was very questionable. Very questionable. So, we have to watch the continued development of Tommy Rees as well. It's your job as an offensive coordinator to realize where your offensive line is and to say, how can I get the best out of this offensive line where they currently exist?
Mm-hmm.
And asking them to create a yard to 2 yards push right now in the center, when they haven't effectively been doing it. That's just not the best way to go about it. It's just not the best way to go about it. So I would, if Jack Cohn is healthy, Jack Cohn should be the starting quarterback. All this other stuff, we can move on from that. There is no quarterback controversy, in my opinion.
Right. Now he's got to play. He's got to get back to being what he was the first two games in my opinion, moving forward.
Absolutely.
If he plays the next 2-3 games like he did against Wisconsin and Purdue, then sure, we can maybe have it then. But right now,
But the one thing that surprised me is how the players responded to Drew Pine.
Right.
There wasn't like, oh man, Jack is hurt.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, Drew's in. And everybody was excited. And it wasn't just like that, the backup quarterback is in. Now, people were saying he's the third string. No. If you really followed everything over the spring and summer,
right.
Drew Pine was the backup quarterback. People got thrown off just because they had a special package for Tyler Buckner.
Which we talked about all summer.
It's like, no, this is the backup quarterback, and this is the guy, even coming into next year, that Tyler's going to have to beat out to win the starting position. So I'm excited about this game. Can you tell?
Yeah. I texted you kind of late last night, right? Like, hey, Sean, can you come on tomorrow? And I felt like you were already anticipating the answer before.
I saw the bubble coming up.
Like, I think I know what Brian wants. Yes. I mean, that's my question yet. Like,
I'm excited. I'm super excited.
Yeah. Yeah. Omar Austin, by the way, tell your little fellow happy birthday. And of course, being 7 years old, that's the best age because it's the best number. So 7, 17, 27, 30, anything with a 7 in it is obviously your best years.
Yeah.
So Tavis McKay also has either birthday today or birthday this week, but he wants a Cincinnati win for his birthday. And Sean, at the end of the day, we're not gonna have you on for our prediction show tomorrow. So I want to give you an opportunity to kind of give what we discussed during that show as we kind of give our keys to game and then our prediction. So I want to give you an opportunity to kind of give your keys to the game today and then your prediction. Then also before we leave here today too, I want you to tell people everyone that has come to your guys' show has loved it, but I want you to just continue to let people know about the show you and Malik are doing.
Yeah.
Because you know how we are. We are both believers in this, Sean. We are not competitors. We are part of the same family.
No.
And if people are going to listen to your show, they're not going to stop listening to mine. They're just going to listen to both and vice versa. Yeah. And so that's why we love having Sean on. And I want to try to get Malik on here too. But he may be too big time for us now. His tweets are now going up on like Fox News and all that, So it's like, okay, how's that a story? Whatever. But anyway, your keys to the game, and then your prediction for Saturday's outcome.
My first key to the game is who has the keys. Actually, who will have the keys to this Notre Dame offense? That's going to be very important to me, and how they drive this, what I call sports car. The Notre Dame program is no longer an economy car, family SUV just to get around. We win 10 games every year. We expect to go to the college football playoffs every year. That's the expectation. This is a sports car, which means we have a sports car that comes with high insurance, and you have to you don't give the keys to the sports car to the kid, which is why I said Jack Cohn has to be the guy to start. His poise and his maturity, he's the right person to drive this sports car the rest of the year. And we just have to keep him healthy. So
can I say
something?
I want to interrupt you real quick. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Or a thought that I want to get your thoughts on along that line. So I'm interrupting you for a purpose because of what you're saying. Part of me feels like if Drew Pine were to play this game, it makes me think I might actually feel that Notre Dame has a chance to even be better against this team. And let me explain why.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I agree with everything you said about Jack Cohn. I think he's a starting quarterback. I have two concerns. I have one concern, and that is if he's not 100% by Saturday.
Yeah.
You and I both know you're an NFL guy. You have seen, and my thing I point to for 30 years, we see it for 30 years as I've been watching NFL. These guys come in off the bench. They play great. Some dumb team decides to give this guy a contract for a lot of money because of what he did in 2 games.
Right.
What they don't realize is when your backup quarterback's in the game, everybody else kind of says, hey, I got to step up my game.
Yeah.
And part of me wonders is if Drew Pine does start, does everybody, because they have faith in him, but they also know we don't have our leader who's right. Jack. Does everybody step up their game, and could that be good for Notre Dame? Because then that maybe almost forces the line to say, hey, you got to be on your game today. Yes. It forces Kevin Austin, hey, and Braden Lindsey, you got to be locked in today, buddy, because you got to have Drew's back. Part of me wonders if that might not be for this game, might not even be maybe a little bit of and then you give Jack another week to get healthy because you're going to need him. You're going to need him for the stretch run. You get him healthy. You rest him this game. You play Virginia Tech, and he's got the bye week. What are your thoughts on that? Again, just a theory. It's just a theory.
It's interesting you say that because going into the Wisconsin game, we said, we can beat Wisconsin without Tyler. Yeah. We don't need his package this week. We need his package against Cincinnati, possibly, as a change-up. I feel the same way. The thing about Drew Pine, I don't even know if Wisconsin game plan for Drew Pine. I think they game plan for Tyler Buckner possibly coming in for a couple of plays. But no, and Drew Pine came in, and I think his ability to move his legs is what changed things for that Wisconsin defense, right? Like you said, they knew where Jack Cohn was going to be. Drew Pine was able to move. He was able to move to the right, hit a receiver down the field, do some other things, avoid the rush. The one strip sack he did give up, he had time. He stood there and didn't get the ball out.
Right.
And Brian Kelly was telling that when he came to the sideline, like, man, you have to get the ball out or throw it away. So you might be spot on with that. Either way, I think because they battled. It wasn't like Jack Cohn convincingly won the starting job.
Right.
It was a battle. Drew Pine made him win the job, which made both of them better, in my opinion. And people around the program spoke highly of Drew Pine all spring and summer. So you feel very comfortable either way. If you sit Jack Cohn, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with Drew Pine coming in. And I think specifically this week, there will be a Tyler Buckner package, probably in the red zone, especially.
Yeah. Hopefully he's healthy enough to play this weekend because I do think he adds an element to it. There's no question.
Quarterbacks pulling hamstrings. That's always a strange thing to me. But he's a running quarterback, very athletic, so different type. So, yes, the key, whoever's at the helm is a key, which ties into my next. I need to see a better play calling game from Tommy Rees. Mm-hmm. We've seen what Marcus Freeman can do. coming into a game and in game.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that. Okay, ante up. It's time for you to put your cards in the middle of the table, Tommy Rees.
Mm-hmm.
Big game. Let's see what you can come up with in this big game. We know you can come into the game with a game plan, but can you make the necessary adjustments early on and call a really good game in the red zone? Because you need more than field goals.
Yes.
You need touchdowns this game.
Yes.
You need touchdowns.
Yes.
Against Wisconsin, you can get away with field goals.
Mm-hmm. Not against
this game. You can't get away with that. You have to be able to convert and have high efficiency in the red zone. And last but not least, in games like this, I said it early in the podcast, there's always something quirky that interrupts the pure flow of a game where you think it's going one way, whether it's special teams, block punt. And we saw Cincinnati change the fortunes of that game against Indiana with a kickoff return for a touchdown and 2 long punt returns. Notre Dame special teams. Jay Bramlett was great last week. Jonathan Dorr was a little bit iffy.
Mm-hmm. 3 missed field goals already in 4 games.
Yes. And I didn't expect that. I thought he would definitely be more consistent this year.
And his misses are short. Like he's like 2 of his misses have been short. Like he goes out and misses a chip shot against Wisconsin and nails a 52-yarder later. It's like you almost say, hey, let's take a couple delay of games
and move him
get him back to 50 so he's more comfortable.
And so for me, special teams is the third key to this game. That's like the key who has the keys to the offense, Tommy Rees and his play calling, and special teams, which we've talked about Notre Dame special teams needing to step up and be more consistent. It was interesting after the game to hear Brian Kelly say, well, you know, we have been running boundary returns. We thought, man, let's run a field return, switch it up. You know, we don't do it a lot because it opens yourself up to more holding calls. I'm like, but you have a speed guy.
It also opens you up to 96-yard touchdown.
So
because can you explain that? Because let's explain that to people, because a boundary return essentially means you're just going straight and within 5-10 yards, there's people there.
Yeah.
Meaning Chris Tyree doesn't get a chance to build up speed. If you watched him on that middle return against, and I thought it was a left return, Vince said that Kelly said it was a middle return, which makes sense based on it because he just ran so far left.
Yeah.
But what it did is it allowed Chris Tyree enough room to build up speed. And once he does that, he's the kind of guy you saw on that kick return. He can one cut and get right back to full speed.
Yeah.
He doesn't, you know, a lot of guys make a cut and it takes him. No, he can cut and go. And so, yes, it made no sense. It's like, why even have him back there?
Yeah.
If you're just going to do field boundary returns every time, or it's having fair catch it all the time. But yes, you're absolutely right. It's maddening to say. It is maddening to say that, but that's the reason why it's maddening that Sean's bringing it up, is because the boundary returns prevent any chance from Chris Tyree to build up speed.
Yeah, it's like if your reason for not giving your playmaker and his speed the best opportunity and the more room to make plays is the lack of discipline not to hold, like we don't want to, that opens up the opportunity for more holding calls. What?
So does every play you run.
But it gives you the best opportunity for the big return. Like what?
I know.
Like you have to take the risk and teach your players how to block and not to hold. And guess what? By the time he got to the 15-yard line, you started to see the seal of the blocks. Like it was opening like the Red Sea. It was like, that's a huge hole, which if it was a middle return, I know he said it was a middle return, but it really didn't look like a middle return, the way the blocking set up. And you can see all of the Wisconsin players, if you show it from behind Wisconsin coming downfield, they anticipated a boundary return because that's all Notre Dame had been doing.
Which made me love the call there too, by the way. It was a great call.
It was a great call.
Yeah.
But like, can we get it more than maybe once a game after the boundary return has been stuffed over and over again?
Yeah, because it is only going to take him to break one more to midfield before team just say, screw it. We're kicking it out of bounds, or we're going to kick it out of the end zone, or we're going to try to pin it so far on the outside that then they run the risk of kicking it out of bounds. And you get 30.
And I hope Cincinnati has enough gumption to say, well, not against us. Okay.
Yeah. I hope they pull a Bo Schembechler.
Yeah.
That's what I'm. For those who maybe are younger, Bo Schembechler, I believe in his career up until 1989, had never given up a kick return for a score. Correct?
Yes.
And obviously the special teams coordinator was like, hey, they got Rocket. We may not want to do that. And Bo was like, now I've heard that actually was not true, that Bo didn't actually do this, but he took the sword.
Yeah.
Basically was like, well, we've never given up a kick return touchdown. We're not going, we're going to kick to Rocket. We're not afraid, and Rocket took 2 back against him. Never had given up a kick return for a score. Rocket took 2 back on him in the same game in '89. So,
and they squid kicked the last time.
Yes. Now, how great was it to see Rocket on the screen? I didn't quite understand everything he was saying.
Did you see his tweet?
Did
you see his tweet? He was like that. No, he tweeted out that number 25 is special.
Yeah.
After the return.
The last time we saw a number 25 get the ball in space was Braden Lindsey in 2019, and he was doing things with it. I'd like to see them do that on offense. But that's the thing about this team, Sean, is they do have so many explosive weapons. They've got to do a better. And I'm bringing this up to go back to get us back on track on your keys of the game. It goes back to what you were saying about Tommy Rees. He's got to do a better job of game planning to get his most explosive weapons the ball in space more.
Absolutely.
That's Lindsey and Tyree.
Yep.
Chris Tyree going through a game with 3 offensive touches is an excuse, unless it's because you're up 57-0 at halftime and he touched the ball 3 times and you're taking everybody out. I mean, in a close game, there's no reason to have Chris Tyree only have 3 touches. Just none. So
you have spoils of riches like he does.
Oh, yes.
As a play caller. I guess it could be challenging because you do want to get everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much he can do with Kyron and Chris in the ball game at the same time.
Yeah. I want to see more of that, man.
Because Kyron can go split out.
Yes.
In the slot. Or go all the way out and pull the linebacker out to the sideline with him if it's man-to-man. And now you lessen the people in the box. And now you can hit the corners with Tyree.
Yeah.
Or he's much better running up the middle this year.
And way more decisive than Kyrie.
Yes, definitely way more decisive.
Yeah.
So he just needs to be better. He needs to identify what gives my offensive line the best chance to be able to execute. It's not the pistol running up the middle. Don't run up the middle out of the pistol. And don't RPO and just let your quarterback sit there.
Mm-hmm.
Run reverses. The Cincinnati defense is very aggressive.
This brings us to a question, Sean, that somebody had I want you to answer. Kyle Miller says, what about this theory? Notre Dame hasn't run sweeps and outside much because they have been saving those plays for the Cincinnati game, saving it for this Freeman type of defense we're about to face. Thoughts?
It could.
I know your answer. No, that's not what they're doing, but I hope it is. I hope it is.
I'll go with that. I'll go with that. I don't think that's what's been happening. I just think, like I said before, I just don't understand. I know they want to bang with Kyron, but the type of runner he is, like, you have to run zone, outside zone, both ways, keep the defense guessing which direction you're running, and then run bootlegs and play action off of that to open up the passing lanes and give your offensive line a better position to be able to block and pass.
You're not good enough up front to just hammer teams with inside zone. You've got to stretch. You've got to run buck sweeps. You've got to allow Kyron to let things happen because he's once. I mean, that's what he did against Clemson last year. That's what his big play against Clemson was. It was an outside. It was a sweep to the left. Yeah. He let the hole open it up, and as soon as he saw it, he hit that sucker, and he was gone. And it's been strange. It's been very strange.
But once again, what do you think? We talked about this earlier. How it's crazy because essentially Tommy Rees is coaching himself when he coaches Jack Cohn. Do you think that limits his ability to be creative? Because he tends to go more to the plays that if he was the quarterback, this is what I would like to do. Or this is how I could be effective, instead of looking at the totality of the offense
Mm-hmm.
and devising things that works, not just because of the quarterback you have, but because of the total weapons and unit that you have on the offensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what's your prediction, Sean?
Oh, man. Last week I predicted that Notre Dame would win the game pretty easy. I think it was 27-17, right? Vince and I had the same prediction.
I believe you went. I believe so. Yeah, let me pull that up because Sean. And for those who don't know, we put predictions out for Notre Dame every week on our website.
Yeah.
Not just for Notre Dame, but also for big games. And I was very disappointed, Sean. Usually, you and I predict the same outcomes in games. So when I saw that you took Clemson and Texas A&M last week, I was very disappointed. Let me see here. Game prediction for Wisconsin Notre Dame. Sean, you had 27-17. Yeah.
27-17. So I think Cincinnati puts I do think Cincinnati will score in the 20s. I'm going to step out on a limb. This is the week we see some balance from this Notre Dame offense and big plays. And I think the defense scores another touchdown.
Okay. So you think they'll pull away late? Like it's a 7 to 10 point game and, Cincinnati's trying to drive to get back in and okay.
37-24. 37-24.
I'll tell you what, if I'd feel good about, even though Notre Dame's offense wouldn't have scored 37, I'd feel good about that because if this offense puts a 30 spot onto Cincinnati, this is a good Cincinnati defense. Yeah. It is. If they put a 30 spot on this defense, then I'm going to feel pretty good about. At least, I mean, it's not a great performance, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, in my opinion, for this offense.
Now, see, this is the key, right? We've talked about their best units, their defensive backs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's clear. We faced a Purdue team whose best unit was their pass rushers off the edge.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the best guys. And then with Wisconsin, it was their front seven. Big, physical. You're not going to run the ball on them. But we talked about how susceptible they were on the back end if you could give your quarterback time to throw. This week is totally different. This might be, as a unit, they're good. I don't think their front seven is as good as Wisconsin's. That's just my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's a different type of front seven, though.
They have the better individual. Like, if you look at Wisconsin and Cincinnati's front sevens, you say, who's the best player of all of them? It's Myjai Sanders.
Myjai Sanders, yes.
But as a unit, you're absolutely right. Wisconsin has the best front seven that Notre Dame will have faced, and arguably the best coached front seven that Notre Dame will face this year.
Yes.
There are better individual players. Myjai, Drake Jackson from USC. There's not a better group of front seven players that Notre Dame will face all season than what they faced last week against Wisconsin.
I thought Wisconsin did a great job with their game plan of coming downhill, saying, look, we're going to pressure Jack Cohn. We're going to take him off his game. And the only thing that Notre Dame could counter with that was to open it up, get the ball out quick. I wanted to ask you this, and I forgot. Mm-hmm. Is it time for us, if you watch Tom Brady or other great quarterbacks, when you get a talented player like a Travis Etienne, Clemson rarely asks Travis Etienne to stand in there and take on linebackers when they blitz. The best thing for him to do was free release.
Right.
Like, even if they come inside, free release, we're going to get the ball out to you on the swing pass, and you do what you do. Mm-hmm. You make a man miss, wide receivers block, we get 10 to 15 yards. I haven't seen that enough. With the game plan that teams have come in against Notre Dame with, which is to bring pressure up the middle, blitz the linebackers, I want to see Kyron Williams free releasing a lot more, just getting them the ball on a quick swing pass to counter that. Because that's something that with the DNA of Marcus Freeman in that defense, they're going to be bringing in linebackers on Saturday.
So, Sean, I'm going to actually ask you a question that I did not warn you for beforehand.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to predict the players of the game on offense and defense. basically looking at it from the standpoint of if Notre Dame's going to win the way that you predicted them to win, who's the one player in offense that's going to be the biggest driver of that, and then who's the one player on defense? The defensive one, I think, is even harder than the offensive one. Because offenses, you can just pick a guy. You know what I mean? Just like, but defensively, it's like, ooh, man, there's just so many guys playing at a high level.
I'm going to say Michael Mayer has the best game he's had all year.
Okay. That's saying something when you consider how good he was against Florida State.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is because this is the game coming off of a great game that Kevin Austin had. I believe Cincinnati reacts to that and puts their best defensive back on him. And they become the first team that has the gall to say, we're going to give Michael Mayer one-on-one coverage.
Okay. That would be
unwise. And that, I believe, is going to ultimately be a mistake. I don't want to call it an overreaction because I do think Kevin Austin is that good. I think he deserves to be covered by the number one defensive back. But, you know what?
Because they're going to go one-on-one with Ahmad Gardner and Kevin Austin every single time.
Every single time. Yeah. Every single time. Right?
That's why Notre Dame needs to move him around more.
I agree. Because you can move – everybody's interchangeable, right? I mean, you can put Braden Lindsey on the inside and run a straight arrow route or a streak route.
Yeah.
To clear Kevin Austin for a dig.
Or Michael Mayer.
For a dig or anybody else. It's so much. That's why I'm so – we have to do better.
Right. Well, I mean, because I know what's in your head right now, Sean. Like, okay, so if they're going to put Ahmed Gardner on Kevin Austin, go man, then put Kevin in the boundary and run him on a quick up cross route to get Ahmed Gardner out there, and then run Tyree or Williams on a wheel route where you're now isolated against a linebacker or a nickel or something. You know, the creativity were like use what they do well against them.
Yes.
And that's just what we haven't seen enough of.
And if they're going to blitz their linebackers, then that's more opportunity for Michael Mayer.
Catch, throw, catch, throw, catch, throw.
And you know who would be my 1A? My 1A would be Kyron Williams.
Yeah.
Because if we can just get him the ball, not just running the ball.
In space.
Get him the ball in space. He can damage and do damage against defenses.
No doubt.
It's all about anticipating how teams are going to come at you, right? Yep. Like you have enough of a sample size now coming into the Cincinnati game to say, okay, this is what Cincinnati is looking at on film.
Yeah.
Like this is how teams have been effective against us.
Yep.
This is how we're going to counter this. We anticipate this, knowing that this plays to their strength and this is what they want to do. This is what we anticipate, and this is how we're going to counter this. And we're going to counter it early to get them on their heels.
Yeah.
We want to get them back on their heels early. Like, whoa, we didn't expect that. Now what do we go to?
Yep.
And now it's easy pickings. You can go to the run game. You can go to the pass game because you have them off balance the entire game.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see, that aggressiveness, that creativity early on from Tommy Rees in the offense. And it can become an easier game.
Yes.
I don't want to say easy, but it can become an easier game.
Yeah. We're not predicting that it's going to be easy, but if Notre Dame plays their game, they're capable of making it. So
absolutely.
We're going to run. Rob Thidoff, there was a great question you had about USC and North Carolina. I want you to save that for the Friday Free for All mailbag. That's a great, great question, and we'll get to that later. But, Sean, thank you, my man, so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you. We'll get you back on. If you have not checked it out, look up the Lucky Lefty podcast that Sean and Malik Zaire do a great job. I think, again, I like different perspectives. It gives a completely different perspective. I give it as a former coach. Yeah. Sean gives it as, from his perspective. Malik gives it from a former player at Notre Dame. There's so many different great angles, so definitely want to check that out. Buddy, appreciate you so much for having us on, and we'll talk to you again here very soon.
Man, I appreciate you. Irish fans, take care. Big game on Saturday. Support Irish Breakdown. They are the godfathers of the thing when it comes to Notre Dame football and great content.
Everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Game predictions, 12:30. Be ready for me and Vince back on that. You've got Sean's prediction already. You'll hear more analysis from him and Malik about this matchup on the Lucky Lefty podcast. So for Brian Driscoll, I'm Sean Davis. Everybody have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you again very, very soon.